From the Fantasy Formula One podcast, we are going to discuss budget caps and penalties. And the reason why we have budget caps, and the reason why I'm talking about this, I should say, besides it greatly impacting Formula One, is because we have budget caps and penalties in the Fantasy Formula One game. And this diverges from specifically fantasy football, where you can have multiple teams, multiple different leagues, and they never intertwine. So it's just all about whichever team, whichever player you can get. And they're all mutually exclusive. You can each only have one player once per league. But since there's only 20 racers and 10 constructors in Fantasy Formula One, there's something different. And so since Formula One has a budget cap, we here in the fantasy world also have the budget cap. So it's a really interesting mirror to real life. Prior to 2021, there was a lot of haves and have-nots. You had your teams like Ferrari and Mercedes, who had virtually unlimited money, and they could throw lots of money at development and stuff. And like, whereas the smaller teams like Haas, for example, couldn't. So what do? They put a cost cap on, and in 2025, it was, I think, $145 million. They reduced it down to $35 million, but then they added more races, so it's again back up to, I think Planet F1 has it at $140.4 million per year. And you spend, if you're working on the car for next season, you're spending 2026 money on the development for that car. And it's not just like 140 per year. It's spread out over like the next 3 years. So you can spend less money. Any money you save this year, you can spend next year, things like that. It's a little bit complicated. That's the basics of how it all works. So what is included in the cost cap? Well, you have car development, like research and development, wind tunnels, things like that. You have team operations, your mechanics, your engineers, your freight, your parts, and you have race operations like pit crew and setup and things like that. What's not included is driver salaries, the top 3 employees' salaries, and marketing costs, which is really, really smart of them. But what happens if you violate it? In the fantasy game, at least last year and all the other years before then, because I'm recording this after the Bahrain testing, but before the actual results, the actual rules are released, we couldn't violate. You're not allowed to violate you're unable to violate, I should say, the cost cap in the fantasy game, but you're able to increase your cost cap by your driver's performances and things like that. The Red Bull team in 2021 breached the budget by $2.2 million, which is only like 1.5% of their overall budget at the time. Their penalty was $7 million. They lost 10% of their wind tunnel time for 2023, because they had already been working on the 2022 car, so they were penalized in the future where it would hurt more. But the lack of wind tunnel time and car development money didn't prevent them from winning in 2023, of course. What happens if you break the budget cap now? Well, if you're underneath 5%, which is considered a minor breach, then you get a financial fine and reduced development time in the future, like Red Bull. But if you have a major breach, so over 5%, then the penalty could be up to point deductions. And even if it's bad enough, you could get disqualified from the championship. So it's pretty much behind the scenes for us as viewers and fantasy players, but it's really interesting how they mirror each other. And it has a huge role in how the racing game is, how the race and the game, I should say, are developed. Well, that is our little talk about budgets. I hope it helped and hope it was interesting for you. Please be sure to check out all of our other content. Stay caught up on all things Formula One and Fantasy Formula One related before the teams lock. Cheers.